Now, before we dive into this conversation, I would like to insert a trigger warning as this conversation does dive into assault.
Jessie, GBS, I just turn the water on. Big old flex, she never saw before. He's chasing me like waterfall. Jessie,
What's up, guys? It's your sister, Jessie Woo. Welcome to another episode of Just a Couple of Things, y'all. Hosted by me, your sister, Jessie Woo. Thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. And before we get into today's episode, which of course I have a very, very, very special guest for this episode, I just want to make sure that you're subscribed. Are you subscribed? If you're watching me, are you subscribed to my YouTube channel? Hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure that you're following me on every streaming platform that streams podcasts so you can get the audio. Okay? How you doing? Make sure that you go to Apple, you hit follow. Go to Spotify, hit follow. Amazon, all the other people, just hit follow everywhere that you can hit follow at. SoundCloud, just hit follow, period. Okay? And make sure that you're listening to me audibly as well. All right. We just gonna get to it. We gonna jump right on in. Not out, but in. Okay? For this episode, I have a very, very special guest that I want to get into just a couple things with. It's a lot going on right now in the world, in the news. There are so many different clips that are floating around when it comes to just like Black women, relationships, dating, marriage, and all these things. And I came across this woman's work recently when a certain video went viral, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that later on. But I want to welcome to Just a Couple Things, licensed clinical psychologist, professor, scientist, author, and podcast host, Miss Dr. Raquel Martin. Hey!
Thank you. Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to me. I know you're a very busy woman. You got a lot going on. So let's just go ahead and jump right on in. How are you doing today, Dr. Martin?
Pretty good. It's the beginning of the summer for me. So my oldest is in summer camp and he's very much enjoying that. And the summer is when I'm not teaching as much, but I get to do more speaking and do more research. So that part is pretty awesome as well. So doing all the things that I enjoy while being able to have more time to do fun stuff with my husband and my boys is great.
Good. Tell me just a little bit about your background before we get into just a couple things. I want to talk about your profession. How did you get into it? And on a daily basis, what's the gist of what you do?
I actually kind of try to think about it per week because I do certain things on different days. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I see my clients on Wednesdays. I'm a professor. I typically have my courses on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm a professor at Tennessee State University. And the courses I typically teach are Psych of the Black Experience, mental health, hip hop, music, and activism, intro to research methods from a decolonized perspective. And I used to teach intro to psych, but I haven't taught that one in a while. So those are typically Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then Mondays and Fridays are typically like meetings for research. I'm a Hope Lab fellow, so I'm currently creating a new model of Black identity development for Black youth to feel more seen and have more mental health autonomy. And typically have a lot of meetings on Mondays and Fridays. Worse meetings, in my opinion, but it's typically when most of us are free. So that's when I'm meeting with my lab, like my research assistant, meeting with faculty and stuff like that. And then I also do quite a bit of speaking. I probably do 2 travel events a month. So most of the time I would say I'm out of town thugging with my rounds, probably like Friday to Sunday. It's kind of just split up between the days. Like I make it a point to, like, when I do my podcast, we kind of like bulk record. So we typically have a couple of hours when we break that down, but different roles for different days makes it easier for me to focus. I know I always see clients on Wednesdays. I know I'm always teaching Tuesdays and Thursdays. I know I'm typically traveling Friday through Sundays. And it is a lot. I totally get that. I'm also married. I've been with my husband been together for, 25. We've been together for 15 years, married for 8. And then I have 2 boys. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. We balance stuff, wake up at 5 a.m. to work out. But I wouldn't be able to manage all this stuff if it wasn't for the fact that I do have such a firm support system in my husband and my family. Because when I travel, I don't have to worry about anything. Like I'll food prep and
Mm,
stuff, but yeah, it's all about,
that's great.
I don't say balance because I don't really believe in work-life balance, but like
Yeah.
my husband's an accountant and his job is very different than mine. Like we both work full-time inside and outside the home, but he doesn't have to travel for his job. So it makes
Yeah.
it easier for me to travel for my job. Instead of having to
Mhm.
manage both of our schedules with 50 different jobs, we just manage his schedule with his one job and my schedule with my 50. And it just works out.
This is great. So you would say your support system at home and your village is just a very healthy village.
I get asked all the time, how do I do so much stuff? And like, there's no way I would be able to do it if I didn't have such like a healthy marriage and relationship.
Mm,
I think a lot of people have been in relationships previously where someone will make an attempt to like shrink you in
yeah.
some way. And I think that's pretty evident from the beginning, but it takes a while before you get out of the comfort of wanting to be with someone and stuff like that. But I've never had that with my husband. I'm a huge personality. So
Yeah.
like I can
What's your
see how
sign?
the yeah, like I can see how the inclination for some people is like, oh, let me just like shrink her down. But I never had that
Mhm.
with my husband. And even the way my career has shifted, like the ultimate goal was just like, it was just going to be therapy and being a professor. But then I travel more. So like someone who's, that a lot of times you talk about relationships and you get into the superficial stuff, which is, understandable to a certain extent. Love looking at that
Yeah.
man. But I will also say that the values are really important. So like there are times when I forget our anniversary, but I can never forget my husband's values and the way that like he supports me and everything
Aw.
and stuff like that. So like, no, I wouldn't be able to do it. Cause like there are times when I forget to be like, oh man, I'm flying out of town. He's like, oh yeah, that's not on the family calendar at all. I'm like, my
Well,
bad.
damn. You must do a
Um,
lot to forget your anniversary. Not Dr.
well,
Martin.
okay, wedding anniversary, not that, but you're like, how everybody got like 50. Oh, this is when we met.
Yeah.
My
Okay. Okay.
God,
Yeah.
my God. Okay, like, oh my goodness, like, gee,
I'm 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 one of those people.
yeah, that is not me.
Um,
I can't do
This is
it.
the
Like,
first
so
time that
if
we
us
went to
leaving,
this restaurant. This is the first time that
absolutely
we
not.
kids. This is the first time that we
No,
hunched.
no, absolutely not. It's gonna be a firm no for me. Okay, is the dishwasher loaded? Okay, are we? Can we hang out without the children? All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
could like like yeah, big anniversaries, like married, not even engaged. So like married. No, that's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
You're
know
just
for.
like you're just let's just keep it simple. What's your sign?
I'm a Sagittarius.
Oh, okay. I think my son is Sagittarius. My not my I don't have any kids, but I feel like I don't remember whether it's my moon or my sun, but something is Sag. I'm a Cancer.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, now I like you even more because I feel like I when I've watched you like dissect certain things, I'm like, oh yes, like I really really like
Yeah,
her,
I'm
and I
just gonna
tend
get to the
to
point in
yeah
everything.
yeah
Like, when did we first hang out? What? What are
right.
you talking about?
So what made you want to get into psychology of all? 'Cause I feel like
Of all things.
Sag women tend to be able to be great at many things. So
It
what
was like
made
one
you
of the few
decide?
things. It just didn't
Mhm.
bore me. Like when I started undergrad, I was actually going for, it was either nursing or pre-med. It was like medicine, but the classes were so boring. And then the only classes that didn't
Mhm.
really bore me were psych and Black history. So I kind of just combined the two. I went to Fisk University. It's a HBCU. It's expensive. I remember sitting in this class and being like, we paying too much money for me to be this bored. Like I was just bored. And I'm a person who I can't do it. I just
Yeah.
cannot be bored for significant amounts of time. So it was one of the few things that didn't bore me. Plus I always knew that I was going to contribute to the Black community in some way. I grew up in Philly, so activism is always been embedded in like everyone around me. It's understood that no matter what you do, you become an agent of change in some way, shape, or form. So I just decided to do it through psych. But no matter what, like I was probably going to be in some realm of like activism or advocacy. I just decided to do it within the mental health realm.
I love it. I love that you also not only are in the mental health world or psychology, but also that you are teaching about blackness.
Yeah.
I just enjoy it all. So the first time I came across you was recently. There was a Dear Future Wifey podcast clip that went viral,
Mhm.
and it was the Steels, a wife and a husband who are pastors. And there was a moment where the wife said that she was graced to, I might be paraphrasing, but she was graced to iron her husband's clothes, knowing that he was going to go see his side chick.
Yeah.
And, you know, that episode went viral and it caught so much heat, as it should. So much so that Latarius had to do a follow-up and do a live with you.
Yeah.
And I came across this clip of you and I was like, oh my gosh, she articulated something that I feel like many people might have missed, but I was like, oh my gosh, she finally gave me the language for this. And I'm probably going to paraphrase, but you'll remember what you said. You were going,
so we're going to hear it
You
again
won't?
for the first time. So what did I say?
Okay, so you were talking to the wife and the husband, and you know, I think you guys, there was just a little bit of back and forth, and the wife said, you know, I was just sharing my experience. I wasn't saying that being with a cheating husband, when I said God graced me to iron my husband's clothes so he can go see his side chick, I wasn't saying that God's going to grace you to do the same. I was just sharing my experience. And you said, we have to understand the difference between sharing our experience and giving people a template. And I
Yes,
said,
I actually do remember that one, because like people will just lay it out and will use it as justification. And then also like the church piece of it, right? Like abuse does not come dressed up as a demon. Abuse comes dressed up as love, even, like, especially when we've been taught to endure. And when it comes to the links between like abuse and the church, like church and cultural teachings often glorify suffering, especially for women.
long
Like
suffering.
enduring emotional neglect or control framed as loyalty, which really confuses abuse with love. And as a psychologist, like as someone who's like walked people through that whole like abuse realm, like a lot of times the framing will be like, oh, she loved me in her own way, or he loved me in his own way, or this is how they showed me love. And it's not love. Like that's manipulation, and that's a predator that's cloaked in affection. Like if someone tries to control you, if they try to isolate you and they say it's because they love you, that is not love. It's emotional abuse. And many of us have been taught, whether it's through overt statements or whether it's through like the way what we see, because it's not always what you are told, it's also what you see, like what they showed in that video. We're taught to normalize it, like, you know, oh, they were riding from me, not me. I got off that bus. You enjoy that.
Hello.
You enjoy that. I'm off. So it's really important, especially since they were coming from a church standpoint. I think it's really important to realize that a lot of times they're glorifying suffering. And from a mental health perspective, it was also really tough to watch. Like a person who was clearly been preyed on and treated poorly and seeing the justifications. Like it was really hard to see another woman, especially a Black woman, just suffering in that way.
What do you think about the church in general? Like the messaging that comes from the church when it comes to dating and marriage, and how abuse and long suffering is kind of enveloped in the messaging that we receive at church regarding dating or getting married.
I don't think it's all churches that do that, right? So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. One of the churches here is Mount Zion Baptist Church, Bishop Joseph Walker, and he does a really good job of integrating mental health and healthy dating and healthy marriage into the church. It's probably one of the reasons why I have such a low threshold for this is how it happens in the church excuse, because I'm in a city where I see the way that it could and should be done. So to say that like, oh, this is how pastors do it, and I'm like, well, that's actually not true. Because I have a very good example of the way it's done here. So I would say certain individuals, like certain churches, use it as a scapegoat. But I also think that there's an issue with the whole realm of like what you're basically talking about is spiritual bypassing. And that's when people use the church as an excuse for mistreatment and maltreatment and abuse. and saying that like if you prayed enough, God would bring you through it, and trying to use that as a way to not have any autonomy over what happens to you, whether you stay or whether you walk away. I don't think it's all churches, but I do think that, we're both on social media, that we can see that like certain things go more viral.
Yeah.
And I wish that there were more, and it's also church, right? So like a lot of them aren't integrated into like the whole social media stuff, and but I wish there was just as much of a highlight on the churches that do it well as there are on us addressing and giving light to the ones that are doing it wrong. Like I think it's helpful to show the ones that are doing it wrong so we can use that as an example of what to do and what not to do. But there's so many amazing people out there who understand that like you can have Jesus and a psychologist. There are so many people who understand having conferences that make sure that we talk about what's appropriate in church and how like God did not bring you to it so that you can be put to suffer at the hands of a man. Like God didn't make the ultimate sacrifice just so that you can be harmed by one of his other children. Like, oh, no. When did God, well, no, that's not the God we serve.
Exactly.
So I wish there were more microphones in the hand of those people, but I will say at the majority of the time, they too busy like running their church the right way to be like, oh, let me do a podcast.
Right. True.
It's very hard. So I would say like one of the reasons why I do have such a low threshold for that is because I see a good example of it in the very city I live in, to just be like, that's not accurate. It's not accurate to use the word of God to do that, because I know someone who does it appropriately. I also tell the bishop all the time, like, you should travel and speak to your people about why they doing it wrong. Of course, all pastors are humble, and he's like, well, yeah, like, but not every church does that. But I do think it's a really good, it's an important example to see it in the same way as a psychologist, to be like, and also a psychologist that's a believer. Because during that live, one of the questions was like, oh, something, and us as believers, I said, I'm a believer as well. I grew up in the church. I'm also from Philly. So like we, Richard Allen, we are the birthplace of African Methodist Episcopal Church. So like, Sunday was just another day to go to church. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, it's Sunday. It's like, yes, let's put on those itchy stockings, just another day. And, and I think there's a significant difference between the word of God and then the disciples and the messengers of God. But either way, like you're still a human being, and you don't get to treat anyone appropriately. But even using that as a justification, right? Like, okay, so because I don't attend the same church as you feel as though that the definition of abuse is different, and I may not understand it. Abuse is abuse. It's manipulation. It's a control. Individuals are predators. And I can believe that whether I believed in God, Buddha, Yahweh, either way, facts are just facts. The earth is round, water is wet. You're a predator. Right. That's just what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Psychologically, though, and this isn't just for the church, but we're speaking on the heels of that clip. Psychologically, why does it tend to be women that are constantly victimized in these situations, whether it be church or whether it just be every day? Like, is there some insight to that psychologically?
Well, I don't think it's solely women. I think women may feel more. I don't even think women feel comfortable acknowledging the abuse, because especially since, we're in a place right now where people think the amount of money you make insulates you from being victimized or someone preying on you, right? So like women are of course more likely to be abused, but that's actually more of like it's like a systemic thing. I don't want people to hear like women are more likely to be abused to think that like there aren't men being abused out there. There aren't non-binary folk being abused out there. There very much are. But if we think about the system and the way that it made it so that you couldn't have any independence or autonomy specifically for women, we very much see it's like the fertilizer for predators to grow, right? Like the ability to be able to get your own credit card and have your own financial autonomy just started. Not just to me, anything that happens in the past like 4 or 5 decades, like that's
it just started.
If it's the fact that like women could couldn't go to school. And then like, let alone the fact that we're Black women. So a lot of times we'll talk about, they'll give these dates for women's suffrage, but like the European American part is implied because I didn't get women's suffrage the same way that like my
Right.
European American counterparts did. And that's the ultimate agency. Or the
Susan B.
ability.
Anthony was not fighting for suffrage for Black
No,
women.
not for us,
Hello.
you know, and a lot of the reasons why a lot of people decided to stand up in terms of European Americans is because they wanted to be like, okay, so I know Black men, Black people aren't going to get rights before me. Like,
Right.
you know, let's be honest with that.
Right.
But those are kind of like the breeding grounds for lack of independence. If you can't have education and most of the jobs are limited to that, then you also can't have autonomy in terms of money and being able to care for yourself. If there's no reproductive autonomy, then you're more likely to be in a situation where you can't not only care for yourself, but the people that you bring into this world. So it makes it so that you are more likely to be forced to stay in a situation where the only person who has autonomy to make sure that your basic needs are met is the man. We have to think about it and like, we got to zoom out and be like, well, why is it more likely women? Well, who are more likely to have their rights taken away?
Right.
And if we also talk about like, why is it more likely to be women of color? Well, if we're looking at like unequal pay and pay inequality, even if we have a certain level of rights, who are less likely to be listened to and who are more likely to, there's a pay disparity. Like we don't make the same amount of money. Black women make the least amount of money, right? So we have to think about it in a systemic standpoint of like, predators, one of the main things they'll do is isolate you. And it's not only isolate you from individuals, like your support system, it's also financial isolation, right? We have to make sure our basic needs are met. Our basic needs being met are the things that make it so that we can be present cognitively to make better decisions. But if you don't even know where your money or your meals are going to come from, how can you think about escaping a situation, right? People expect bruises, but a significant amount of abuse is often psychological, coercion, financial control, spiritual manipulation. They don't just show up in physical exams, but they're deeply damaging. These kinds of abuse will erode a person's sense of reality and autonomy. They'll lead to symptoms like self-doubt and anxiety and emotional numbness. Like she doesn't have to be in a cast to be in crisis. All of these other forms of abuse, psychological, emotional, financial, they're very real. And it's often the most dangerous because it convinces the victims that they deserve it. So I think that's what people are looking for. Like, oh, their arm isn't broken. They don't know how to have a bank. They don't have a bank account. They're not even thinking about them, just them. They're thinking about their child. They can only buy meals on the card that they are the added user. If that gets cut off, that gets cut off, right? The abuser is sending money to their family overseas. So they're not only thinking about how they're caring for themselves, they're thinking about,
the family.
My aunt and my uncle and my mother will not have a home. This person was integral this person was integral in their green card status to bring them over here. So that means not only it's not even just about me. And most of the individuals, you know, especially if we're talking about people of color and marginalized and historically excluded populations, we're collectivist people. We're not individualistic. It takes a lot to think about our own health and well-being in the first place. But a lot of times predators not only set you up, they set your family up. So they're not only they're like, don't think about just you. I will burn this entire thing down for your entire family.
Right. We're seeing that right now. Because I was going to ask you about, you know, just some of the things I want to ask you about regarding Diddy, Cassie. And you kind of touched on it with something you just said, which is, listen, like, I will burn this whole thing down. This is not just me abusing you. Yeah. This is me hurting you and your entire family. And, you know, it came out that Cassie's mother was, you know, $20,000 in debt. She had to take out a lien on her home or a loan against her home to pay Diddy $20,000 because he threatened to release a video of Cassie that was inappropriate. And he does this to her mother, who he knows doesn't have the money. And also that should tell you that Cassie didn't really have access to her own money either. Right?
Well, yeah, she didn't have access. I mean, we also have to think about the age difference in that.
Of course.
I always have an issue with like people discussing like, you know, finances and age. You know, fame doesn't insulate you from anything. If anything, it makes it harder to leave because, you know, you can't even be met with like, let us help you. It's like, well, why did you stay? Right. Like a lot of the examples that are, I'm sorry.
No, I'm agreeing with you. It's like, why did you say you're famous? Like,
you're famous, right?
Right.
And I think people need to understand that like survival isn't consent. It's just survival. And what I mean by that is like many people do what they need. Many victims, every victim, they do what they need to stay physically and emotionally safe. And that may include staying in the relationship. That may include appearing supportive in public. That may include posting smiling photos with the individuals. Like, these are trauma-informed survival strategies. This is what they're doing. It's not consent, it's survival. These are not signs of approval. You know, a trauma response is when a person appeases their abuser to reduce danger. If you smile in a photo with your abuser, it doesn't mean that you're okay. It can mean that you know the safest way out is pretending everything will be fine until you're actually safe to run away in the first place. Leaving is dangerous. The most lethal time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave.
Why?
Could be many things. It can be, oh, now you're showing yourself being ungrateful. It could also be the predator being looked at as, why would anyone want to leave me? People will start questioning how amazing I am if you left me, if they're not looking at the facade. It can be they feel threatened. And a lot of it is the fact that they feel threatened, but it's like, what part of them feels threatened? Is it the public part? Why would anyone leave? Because when
Public
people,
perception.
happy relationships, for the perception, right? Are you threatening my masculinity or my femininity? Because women can be abusers as well. Is it the fact that, like, just knee-jerk reaction, like, no one has ever left me, and like, what does this mean for me, and I'm just going to take out my anger on you? And the ways that they stop that from happening: financial dependence, children, right? Like, it's ultimately like the threats. And when it comes down to it, the highs and lows of leaving and staying, they create a cycle that will really, like, rewire the individual's brain. I think people need to understand that trauma not only impacts the way the person sees themselves, but it impacts the way that they see the world. It impacts the way that they see others. And it's really hard to operate in a realm of being unsafe, right? Like, it's really hard to think about health and well-being, especially if you're thinking about not only yours, but other people. So when someone says, why didn't she just leave? Or why didn't he just leave? I want to ask, do you ask people why they didn't leave a burning building faster, or did you help them get out? Like, what are we focusing on right now? Right. And I think it's also way easier to focus on stuff from the outside looking in. Like, as someone who, it's an occupational, I'm a psychologist. So I have literally walked people through some of the most awful and hurtful things in the world. I think most of the time I'm, like, pretty chill, but it's because I'm like, yeah, I've dealt with some pretty awful stuff with my clients. So, like, my threshold is kind of high. A lot of times I'll be like, chill. People are starving. Okay.
Yeah. You've heard it all. You've seen it all.
I've heard it all. It's why I'm so chill on the internet. I'm like, oh, they wrote a negative comment. I don't know this person. Whatever. Like, I don't, the internet isn't a real place. But it's also the reason why I think about it systemically, right? Like, I've worked with people who have been abused mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually. And, like, a lot of thing that always comes up is the system that made it possible for them to stay there. Made it not possible for them to stay there, but that made it impossible for them to leave.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is why, like, even recently I saw a video with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher was like, you know what? Victims, you all need to say what happened immediately, and you need to leave immediately. But we have videos of Cassie leaving, for instance. We have all this evidence of what was going on in the background, and Cassie's just one example of something that happens every day. So what would be your answer to folks that say, well, y'all need to tell us immediately? Mind you, again, we have a video of this girl leaving, and we see what happened when she tried to leave, but yet people will still be like, well, you needed to leave.
Yeah, I'd probably tell them to F off. I'm be real with you. I have a really low threshold for idiots. Like, when people get stupid, I get mean.
Oh my God. Same.
Like,
Same.
Many victims don't speak up because they've already been taught that no one will believe them. And honestly, if we're going to get really specific, because I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, scientist, all that, but I specialize in Black health and well-being. It's not the only population I work with, but it's my specialty. And Black women and queer people and the other individuals with marginalized identities, not even marginalized, individuals who have been pushed to the margins, because marginalized doesn't put enough emphasis on, like, who did it. We carry preemptive trauma, the belief that, like, we'll be dismissed and blamed or humiliated if we speak. Meg Thee Stallion was criticized and mocked for crying after being shot. Cassie was doubted because she stayed silent. Like, these things are, like, silent and very loud, like, re-traumatizations. When survivors see people like Meg Thee Stallion not being believed, they learn to stay silent.
Yeah.
It's not protecting. Like, we have to think about, once again, the system that's learned.
Mm-hmm.
hopelessness created by the public. Speak immediately. Then what? I speak immediately. Then what? Are you going to come in and help me? When you say
Right.
speak immediately, have you thought about what my plan is going to be? Speak immediately. Okay, I'll speak
Right.
immediately. They've cut me and my family off, and I have nowhere to go. I have no one who's going to believe me. Speak immediately. Do I bring me or just bring my child who can also be a victim? Speak immediately. To who? They've isolated me from everyone and everything. Speak immediately. Oh, well, you have money. They have no access to that account. And then if I do have
Right.
access to account, they monitor this account 24/7. So every single time I take out more money than what they expect me to take out, I'm already on high alert. Speak
Yeah.
immediately. They have people looking at me 24/7.
Yeah.
Speak immediately and then do what? Because once again, the most dangerous time is directly after someone has attempted to leave.
Yeah.
And speak immediately coming from your amazing high horse where you have never had to deal with this in the first place.
Mm.
Not as a woman, not as someone in a historically excluded population, not as someone who is an immigrant, not someone who is caring for their family, someone who
Speak
has
on it.
always had some level of autonomy. But tell me to
Hello.
speak immediately. What am I going to
Yeah.
do next? It's
What's
absurd.
next? I remember recently I was on the Shan Booty podcast and I talked about, being sexually violated when I was 9. And I
Mhm.
spoke immediately. And I was told I was a liar
Yep.
by my own family. So I feel like a lot of times when I see the public trying to gaslight victims, it's like, please, all of us have been here or know someone that has been here. Why would a 9-year-old lie about
Yeah.
why?
First of all,
Just why?
I'm so sorry that happened to you in the first place. Not only the assault, but also like not being believed, because that's a secondary assault. And I
It
don't think
is.
people understand that either, right? Like,
Yeah.
the assault and then not being believed is another assault. The fact that you have to walk through the world with that, I can't imagine like having to watch women consistently not being believed is just another attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't mind if you unplugged from that. We'll say that. I don't think, I don't know if you need to be staying up to date on all this awful stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah. It's so crazy because I feel like, I was violated as a child. Now I was violated as an adult as well.
yeah,
And and even then, like I remember years ago, I was on Love and Hip Hop Miami and I talked about my experience and I had to go online and see people tell me that I was lying. People tell me, oh, she's fake crying. Like I was like, if you see me on the show talking about it, like I'm in shambles. And what happened to me by someone who was very popular in the industry. And come to find out, there was a whole long list of other women who went through it. And at the time that I was like sharing it, all these other women were coming forward. And you know what's crazy? I felt guilty because I felt like if I would have said something sooner, if I would have went to the cops sooner, if I would have, I felt like then those that came behind me would not have happened. It's just the weirdest thing. I feel like people don't understand the mind of someone who's been here. And even going back to when I was a child, what happened to me, it was a family member. And I had my family call me a liar. But then years later, come to find out, there were other family members who went through the same thing with the same person. And so I just feel as if when I see the public gaslighting folks, like gaslighting victims, it doesn't even, I think I've just gotten to the point where I've just grown numb and also like you, when people get stupid, I just get mean about it.
yeah,
Cause it's like, let's just be for real.
yeah.
A lot of you think that assault is sex. I don't know the psychology behind that. Maybe you could shed some light on that. But a lot of folks believe that it's just sex. Like it's just you wanted it, or he had money, so she was. That's why she was around. You know what I mean? Like people really just gaslight until the same straight men or the same cis gendered women who will gaslight you. Let a gay person touch them in a way they don't like. Now all of a sudden they understand consent. Now
Yeah,
they understand that it's a violation. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw this quote that was like, what men fear about going to prison is what women fear about walking down the street. Um and I was like, it's pretty salient, right? Because like
Yeah,
one of the biggest fears is being assaulted, and like women walk through, deal with that every single second of the
every
day.
day.
I feel like you said a lot of really salient points. Like one, the guilt. And I would say probably some aspect of shame, like guilt and shame.
Oh yeah,
Guilt is like you did something bad. Shame is like you are bad, right?
yeah,
Like, and feeling that after you being assaulted and harmed, and the impact of that as a result of not being believed and being betrayed, and in some way still feeling as though you could have done more, right?
yeah.
And one thing that may have probably, like, I don't know where you are in your healing journey, like that would help you would be understanding like this is something that at times the predators will lean on in terms of it, right? Like this most abuse, when especially like a young age, is actually by family members.
Yeah.
When people say something as simple as like, only be around family, or it's difficult with like strangers and stuff like that. It's from a lot of times it's from people who watched you very closely,
Mhm.
and possibly know who to prey on. When we think about abusers, I think we need to think about it, instead of saying like victims and abusers, they're predators.
Yeah.
Right. And like predators don't just go all willy nilly. No, they look and they wait and they watch. They see what
Mhm.
support says, lacks of support they can do. They look at what gap you may have in your health and well being or your life and try to fill it, and then make sure that no one else can fill that for you. And once again, it's not cloaked in like, it's not like a demon with a scythe. It's somebody with some flowers.
Yeah.
It's someone with like,
It's your favorite big cousin.
it's your favorite big cousin. It's the person who's not only providing like physical things, but they're also providing a gap in what you receive in terms of love and care, and something that you may not have. It's something about the difference in age. So you have less agency, and possibly less belief. Someone may believe you less. And also you don't know as much cognitively, right? Like, to understand that they will likely doubt themselves, right? Being loved, like when it comes to celebrity status, like being loved publicly doesn't mean being safe privately. Like public affections and
Hello.
gifts or celebrity status can and will often mask controlling or abusive behavior behind closed doors. And that contradiction is pretty disoriented for victims, right? And especially for onlookers who they only see the glamour of it, right?
Mm.
Um, because I'll hear a lot of people saying, like, people, everyone thought we were perfect, so I didn't think I could tell anyone. And then there's
Right.
also this aspect of part of you still cares about this individual in some way, shape, or form. So there's also this inclination to want to protect those that you care about at the end of the day, even when they're harming you, right? And social media and Getty images and media, like, isn't a safety report. Just because someone purchased something doesn't mean he didn't also control their every move, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just really important to realize that like a lot of this stuff is trained in us, right? Like Black women as a sense, like women of African descent, Caribbean descent, we have to understand that performing strength is a survival skill. It doesn't mean it's a lack of
Oh.
trauma or exposure to that, right? Like many victims, especially Black women, learn early to appear in a composed way, to
Oh.
avoid judgment or dismissal. Like that's our shield. And
Yeah.
that shows up as like many things, like hyper independence or perfectionism or humor masking pain. But I think it's really important to realize you're not supposed to mistake strong face for lack of harm.
Mm.
For so many of us, it's how we learn how to survive. And
Yeah.
celebrity status doesn't take away the fact that like people are people, and some people are just simply awful. And even thinking about the fact that like that celebrity status helps to insulate them
Yeah.
from being, held accountable for their actions, right?
Mhm.
Right. I think it's really important to see that like people who they're on the outside looking in and saying, well, they purchased them something, so they should be able to do what they want. How
Right.
much money does it cost? What's the dollar amount that puts it so that this person should be harmed and stuff like that? Like, what do you think is appropriate? It's not
What's the price
$20.
for my safety?
What's the
What's the
price for my
price for my
safety?
sanity?
Yeah, like what do you think is reasonable? What's that
Yeah.
number? Let me see if I can find it so I can like punch you in the face or abuse
Right.
you or make you feel less than. I think with social media as well, it's also really important to realize that like a lot of times people aren't arguing with people. There's the whole aspect of bots.
Right. True.
Um, there's the whole aspect of you're dealing with individuals who just aren't in the right mind.
True.
Um, and then the whole aspect of like you never know what anyone is going through. I think we really put too many people on pedestals. Just because somebody has a more fun job than you or makes more money than you doesn't make them smarter than you, doesn't mean that they have more humanity than you and more empathy than you. It just means that they have more money than you. And I don't even know if they have a better job than you. They just may have a more public job, but it doesn't make them
or more
God.
access.
More access, which means they have more ways to protect themselves.
Yeah.
But I could be sitting here butt naked on the street. That doesn't mean that you have any right to touch me. Doesn't mean
Hello.
anything. Like it's interesting how we'll talk about like self-control and why didn't that person leave? You're talking about my self-control, but you have someone who literally assaulted someone else, and we don't think about that in self-control. So as the victim, I have to have self-control, but the person who punched me in the face and dragged me down the hall,
Hello.
they didn't have they didn't have to have self-control.
Hello.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like this kind of abuse, it very much thrives in silence, and silence is often mistaken for peace, and silence is not peace, at all. Some of the quietest people, are holding the loudest pain, and silence just, it's often a strategy to just try to survive one more day to figure out where they can get help or safety. And when we hear all these comments and stuff like that, sometimes people will be like, I wish there was less public talk about certain things. But to a certain extent, some of the dialogue is very helpful because I think it's important to know who you can and cannot trust. And
that too, and so many people don't have access to, maybe some people don't have financially access to like therapists or psychologists, and then they're hearing these conversations and they're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm like, this applies to me. I'm not wrong. I am a victim of this. Even sometimes people will come in my comments and be like, why are you talking about this? First of all, it's for me. It's for me. Second of all, it's for who else it's for. And if it's not for you, bye. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everything is not for everybody.
Right. But there's somebody somewhere who's going to hear what we're talking about and be like, oh, this actually is going to help me.
Yeah, and you're also letting people know what you are and aren't a safe space for, right? You are a safe space for communication and listening to women and some kind of just taking a minute to slow down and speak. You're not a safe space for racism and homophobia, or you're not a safe space for abuse, right? So it's also important, like people speak about topics to know what you are and aren't a safe space for, right?
Yeah.
You also need to understand people are like, oh, I'm a safe space for communication. I saw your last post. You're also a safe space for abuse.
Hello.
So I think it's important for people to realize a lot of individuals talk about that because they want to. It's their choice. It's agency. But it's also important for people to understand what kind of community and what individuals they want to support. And they need to know what you're not a safe space for.
Exactly.
Right? You need to address it. Like dialogue is important. It's this interesting dichotomy, right? Because like they'll ask why you're speaking about it, but then they'll ask why other individuals don't provide them with like specific details about the way that they were harmed or why they're not talking about it more, why they didn't speak, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to realize that also victims don't owe the public their pain to prove that they were harmed. Demanding like graphic stories or re-traumatizing.
Say that again.
People.
Say that again.
Victims do not owe the public their pain to prove that they were harmed in the first place. Healing doesn't always look like a courtroom. It may look like therapy and community support or boundary setting, but survivors don't need to replay their trauma for our validation. You don't always need a breakdown video from that person to believe that they were broken. And we also need to unlearn this idea, because this is a lot of stuff that's happening with a lot of people in media, that being a good person in public erases the harm done in private. Public image.
Say that again. Hold on, Dr. Martin. I need you to say that again, because a lot of folks, and I've heard this said before, a lot of public figures have this halo effect.
That's intentional though. It's really important to realize like that's intentional. Predators. The reason why it's really important to call it predators is because there's a strategy to preying, right? Like, just same way oppressors play the long game, like predators are oppressors, right? So it's not only about the moment individually, they're also going to set up a system so that they're also being believed, right? So we can't think that being good in public erases harm done in private. Image is not integrity. Okay. So the public image that someone sets is not the same as like relational safety. Abusers can be philanthropic. They can be funny. They can be influential. They can be handsome. They can be
They could be
gorgeous.
talented.
They can be talented while also being controlling, harmful, abusive, and predators, right? And this is what I like individuals need to understand. There's a term called cognitive dissonance. And at the end of the day, something that goes against like an individual thought process or a value that you have will create discomfort in your mind when it's challenged. Like, for example, if I grew up my entire life thinking that tall people were the smartest people in life, and then I got messages about that, I got media about that, I got film about that, you see, it's a genius and they're tall, and then you meet someone who's like 7'8" and they are as helpful as a chocolate tea kettle. Okay. So you have two choices, because that goes against everything you've ever learned your entire life. Like, I've always known that tall people were geniuses, and this man is as smart as a box of rocks, right? You either take the time to unlearn, which takes more time and energy. It's going to be the longer way, or you justify and you rationalize. Well, 7'8" isn't that tall. And this is just one person, right? So it's the same thing when we have like, you see all these, you see philanthropy and you hear their music and you're like, oh, this person has a good image. People, instead of taking the path of more resistance, because changing your thought process and taking more information will cause more resistance. And at the end of the day, it's understandable that it's uncomfortable. Like, our brain wants to have the shortcuts. We're dealing in this crazy world. People will protect the idea of someone even when the facts contradict it. So someone can donate to charity.
Say that again.
People will protect the idea of someone even when the facts contradict it.
People will protect the idea.
Not even someone they know, because a lot of people will be like, I don't know this person. And yet you can't, every time I turn around, you're stepping in the name of love. Like, people will protect the idea of individuals even when the facts contradict it. Image is not integrity. We need to stop letting good PR hide bad behavior. Because it's intentional.
That's bars.
It's intentional.
Dr. Martin, that's bars. That's bars. Bars. Like, that was so good. That was so good, because literally that's what happens every day.
Predators play the long game, y'all. It's not individual. It's money. It's making sure that your friends also like think that you're insane. So now you don't have any friends, and it's making sure if you're saying that, oh, nobody will love you the way that I love you, and oh, let me set your family up, and let me set you up. You just think about it as a system, the same way we think about oppression as like Black people or historically excluded people. It's not just on the individual level of someone calling you the N-word. It's about the fact that you can't get in the job to have a job interview. It's about the fact that learning about our history is an elective, while learning about European American history is embedded in, you gotta learn about that to get a high school diploma. It's about being more likely to be stopped and frisked. These are all systems, right? It's the long game, right? Predators do the same thing, and they make sure they set you up that way, because there's no aspect of them that doesn't understand what they're doing isn't right. They just want to make sure that people don't know about it. And if they do know about it, how can I make sure that I pay them off or do something else? They're predators, guys.
Exactly.
That's just what it is.
Let me ask you this, 'cause I know we got to go soon. What are some early signs that you are dealing with a possible predator?
Someone trying to isolate you is one of the biggest things. I always say therapy does not have a monopoly on healing. Whatever path you take is going to be paved with community. Community is a protective factor. A strong, supportive community is a protective factor against so many things. So they need to isolate you from that community, right? So being controlling about who you spend time with. There's also the control piece, of course, right? Having to know your password, having to know who you are. And it's not because I care about you so much. It's because I just want to make sure that I know every single thing about you. So I also know your routines and your strategy. So if you ever stray, I'm aware of it. It's about passwords. It's about pushing you down in some way. Like your spirit and how you think about yourself, right? I tell my students who I'm training like to be clinicians is like when it comes down to it, you have internalized oppression, but it evolves from injected oppression, right? You only have to tell
Mm.
people that they're not worthy, that they're not intelligent, that no one cares about them 5 times. They will tell themselves that they're unworthy, that no one cares about them the 6th. So it's also important to pay attention to the messages that you're getting to that person that they do to kind of like take you down a couple of pegs. So that
Mm.
you start to do it to yourself. They don't even have to tell you that. You already know
Yeah.
because that's what they injected into you. It's injected oppression. And once again, predators are oppressors, abusers are oppressors, right? So isolation,
Mhm.
separating you from your support community, trying to take you down a couple of pegs, not being supported, it not being a reciprocal relationship. These are all signs of a dish of emotional abuse. And
Mm.
sometimes they'll do it slowly. They'll do it under the guise of a joke. Well, I was just joking, but it's not funny. Right?
No.
I just need your passwords because there's always some kind of justification. I just want to make sure you're safe. But it ends up being controlling. They have access to everything and finding new ways to control you. Everything is a joint account. Everything is you have no time to be to yourself. These are some
Mm.
of like the biggest signs. A really important hallmark, they are going to attempt to isolate you from other people because once they isolate you from your support system, there's no one else for you to go to. That is
Mm.
physically, whether it's moving you to a different location and you live with them, it's
Good.
financially, whether they have access to all your bank accounts so they can also monitor your routines. It's you have no autonomy over where you go or who you do it with. You don't, even if you have a car, it's in their name, you have no access to your money. It's also career wise, right? Like, okay, the reason why we were always told as women to keep something to the side is because if you have to dip, where's your go bag? You took more money out of your
Right.
bank account than you normally do. You typically only go to the grocery store on Tuesday. They know that because they know your routine. And you took out $100 from that account. So now how are you going to get
Mm.
somewhere? Right? How are you going to pick up and leave? Isolation, control, and don't just think about controlling you physically. Access to your passwords, access to your account, access to your location,
Mm.
PIN numbers, um, knowing and not even just knowing every single person that you know, but it's also like just challenging little times when you want to have some autonomy, when you want to walk to yourself, or when you want to be alone
When
at
you
times,
wanna go spend time with that other
when
friend.
you want to spend time with that other
Yeah.
friend, right?
Like,
And
why?
they
Why
get
are
it
you doing
so
that?
yeah, they can isolate you from that friend by making you question that friend, being a little bit manipulative. That person has always been jealous of you. Then
Mm.
you start
Mm.
questioning as well, and then you lo and
That's a
behold, you got
good
one less
one.
friend, right?
That's a good one.
I call my girls my coven. It's hard to attack a coven. It really is. But also think about predators, right? Everyone's seen those National Geographic films. Does the lion or the tiger or the bear, do they attack the group, or do they wait until the person like is alone by themselves? That's why you need to think about them as they're predators. And they know who to prey on. They wait until you're separated. And if they can't wait until you're separated, they will separate you themselves.
That is so good, Dr. Martin. Thank you so much. Like, you've
Thank you for
been
having me.
No, this has been honestly, I mean, you spit like you just said a couple things that honestly that are gonna sit with me for a minute. This was very insightful. So how do we get in contact with you? Should we want your services? How does that work? And how can we support you? Where do we follow you? Do you mind sharing those things?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. So I am Raquel Martin PhD on every single platform: Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Facebook. My podcast is the Mind Your Mental Podcast.
Mhm.
And we're on season 4, in between seasons. So we're about to be on season 4 with new episodes. My website, Raquel Martin PhD, I think we have about like 20 free mental health resources at this point.
Oh,
One of the
great.
things I do make it a point to try to do is listen to my audience and the things that they're struggling with. And my caseload has been full for a little minute, but I still try to provide resources like mental health guides and information. So if there are certain things that my community is asking about, I'll create a guide for it. So we have one about finding a therapist. We have one about respectability politics. We have one about masking in the workplace. We have one about ADHD and how to get an appropriate assessment. And those are all free resources on my website. And yeah, and booking me, I'm free. I'm booked for clients. I only see clients once a week, but if it is to come speak at your organization, I also train clinicians. That is possible.
Great.
And I also run a support group, the Burn the Cape support group for Black women. It's a curriculum oriented support group, 10 weeks. Women get 90 minutes every 10 weeks for sessions, and we are solely donation based. So
great.
donating to that, you know,
donate to her. Y'all want to, since y'all
Donate,
want to
please.
donate to people.
Yeah.
Did you see the lady who got donate? She got
I
$700,000
did.
donated.
did.
White lady who called that little boy the N-word.
Yeah, we are solely donation based. So
Yeah, y'all donate over here to Dr. Martin.
Donate to the group. It's run by licensed mental health professionals. It's not therapy, but it's therapeutic. We do 90 minutes a week for 10 weeks, and the money goes to a care package for the women, as well as the facilitators are all licensed mental health professionals, and they're dedicating 10 weeks of their time. There's a GoFundMe on Raquel Martin PhD.com. You can even just look up Burn the Cape on GoFundMe in there, but we're solely donation based. And it's all about providing mental health autonomy and fostering community. So yeah, all of those things are amazing. But yeah, Raquel Martin PhD on everything. I think I post like at least once a day, but therapy isn't the only path to healing.
You're active everywhere.
Yeah, I manage it. I tell people, like, listen, it's really, as long as you have credible information and as someone who's like still in the throes of learning and educating, like I consider it a service to be able to provide free resources to people, because it's hard, like, to find a clinician that vibes with you. But if you're looking for someone to provide you with resources, my website is full of them.
Well, Dr. Martin, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for reaching out.
Thank you, girl. I've been trying to get you on for a little minute now. Dr. Martin is busy, y'all.
You heard the 27 jobs now, Jessie. Like, come on. Like, you don't heard.
20 jobs, okay. Are you Jamaican?
No, I'm not.
Okay. She worked like a Jamaican child.
I know. One of my best friends is Jamaican, so like I grew up in that house. Rice and peas and tripe and all that stuff. Like, yeah. Well,
I'm Haitian, but I like to say I'm an honorary Jamaican because I'd be having like 20 jobs too, okay? Yeah. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us. You guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Jessica with Things. Again, make sure to follow me on every every streaming platform that streams podcasts. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you support Dr. Raquel Martin, and take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Jessiewoo, GBS. I just turn the water on. Big old flex. She never saw before. He's chasing me like waterfall.
Pioneer.